what do you got to lose? Just do it. Start your own firm. Like if it doesn't work, you're that much stronger because of it, right? You've learned that much. You learn those skills. You're that much more valuable. If it doesn't work, he's like, it's probably going to work. You don't like your job. You're uncertain. You're not making any money. What do you got to lose? And that was like, I still to this day remember where we were sitting at lunch having that conversation, like, okay, that's it. That's what I needed. That was the sort of decision point to me. We're like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start my own gig with.
Was it confidence?
Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Hi, Robert Hartline here with The Decision, EO's podcast where we interview our members about important decisions they've made in their life and business. And with me today, Justin Lowe with Centric Architecture. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
It's exciting.
You know what I'm most excited about is I've really never sat down with you. And you're in my forum.
Yes.
And I'm newly in the forum with you, and we've got some time together just with the group, but not like one-on-one. So I'm most excited about getting to know you.
Yeah. No, me too. I've never done a podcast. This is new for me. So yeah. But likewise, our forum, still feels like it's forming. We were just talking about the retreat coming up, which will be important. So but yeah, it's good to have our forums a good mix of, newbies like me. And can I call you an old timer? Old timers like you? Old timers for
like
EO,
that.
right? Yes, you've been in for a while. So
not as long as many others though. I mean, some people are just straight up OGs of, understanding how to be an EO. And I'm still learning some things about EO that I'm not expert at it, but I am learning more about it.
Yeah.
So for you, before you started your business, what were you doing? Tell me that story.
Yeah. I mean, architecture is one of those things that, a lot of people, we have a friend group that was out at dinner a couple of years ago. And one of the guys, it was a group of couples. And he said, who here actually does professionally what they went to school for? And my wife and I were the only ones who raised our hands and said, yeah, we do architecture because that's what we went to school for. So it's a very specific thing. So, I didn't know I wanted to do architecture. Coming out of high school, going into college, I was a musician. So I thought I was going to, I was going to college to buy some time until my music career took off. And I chose architecture just because a bunch of people told me that's what I should do because I like to draw and I was pretty creative. So had no idea what I was getting into or anything like that. Where my wife, on the other hand, she knew from the time she was in fourth grade that she was going to go to architecture school and be an architect. So,
wow.
So I sort of stumbled into it and had really no clue what it was even about. And so, but, immediately, I had a passion for it, for design, for creating. And it probably helped that in college I met my wife. We started dating she was in architecture school too. So we dated all through college, got married right afterwards. But that was sort of motivation too, to stay involved in, in school. And so before starting my business, I was working in architecture firms, worked in a few different firms around Nashville just had always had kind of figured at some point that I would start my own architecture firm. That was kind of, or be in an ownership role, but didn't know how I would get there or anything. And then, and that's certainly a story we can go into on how that came about.
How'd that come about?
Yeah. This podcast, the decision, I was thinking about, what were sort of critical decision points in my life. And that would certainly be one. So all of this goes back to really the recession. So starting about 2007. So I had worked in a few different firms, had been at a firm that I, had been at for 5 years. Had a great time there, and worked on some great projects. But kind of started getting a little bit itchy feet, and ended up deciding to leave to go to a different firm. And that was 2008. We had my son in 2007. And so my wife was working part-time at that point because we had a baby. And then 2008, I decided, okay, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to this other firm where I thought there might be some better opportunities for me. Having no clue that, what was coming in 2008, right? From an economy just sort of falling apart. And the nature of architecture is it's certainly, cyclical business and related on you're sort of subject to the economy. 2008, I put in my notice, and it was sort of a 2-month kind of transitioning out of the firm I was in to start at the other firm. During that time, all these other architecture firms in town started having layoffs. Things were happening. Things were starting to, not look very promising. I remember calling my, soon to be boss at the new company and saying, "Hey, I'm getting a little nervous." And he said, "No, don't worry. We've got so much work over here. Like we could lose half our jobs and we'll have plenty for you to do." And so I'd already made the decision. One of the things that I, looking back on, one of the reasons I think I wanted to leave where I was at was I felt like there wasn't a clear path to any sort of ownership there. Within that time that I'd put in my notice that I was leaving, they actually offered partnership to three other people in the office and so the wheels had actually started to move, but I was like, no, I've made my decision. I'm going to move on. I'm going to.
Oh, wow. You just said you're just a little bit late.
Yes. And then during that time as well, the firm I was working at, Tuck Hinton Architects, it is called, or at the time, they're still around. They're called Anecdote now, but and still have great relationships there. But they were awarded the convention center project, so they were one of the only firms through 2008, 9, 10 who was incredibly busy when all the rest of us had nothing to do. But nope, I've made my decision. I'm going to leave, and so I left, joined another shop, and within seemed like probably 6 weeks we were out of work, and so in 2000,
was there any regret there?
A little bit, yeah.
I kind of made a little bit like,
yeah,
maybe it was I should.
Right.
Was it that you had made up your mind and you couldn't go back on your word?
Kind of.
Was that
a little bit, and just some naivety about what was happening around us,
Yeah.
So by 2009, my wife had been laid off. We were expecting our second kid at the time, and I was on a 40% salary reduction. So our, family income with a second baby on the way was down to about 30% of what we had been.
Wow.
And there was just so much uncertainty in even, how long was I going to keep the job I had? Because it just, those who remember or lived through it, it was a tough time. There just wasn't a lot of work out there for architects or contractors, construction, anything.
And at that point, did you know how to get jobs? Were you, in the previous places? Were you just doing the work?
I was just doing work. Yeah,
but you weren't going
project
out and
management.
acquiring.
But
I mean, that's a whole nother game.
Nothing about the business side of it did I know.
That had to have been scary.
And that's like in architecture school is design school, really, right? So it's heavy on the theory and design skills, and very little about the sort of professional side of it, business side of it, which I think is a good thing, by the way. I architectural education doesn't end at school. It's a continued thing. So they actually haven't, you can't sit for your licensing exam until you've worked in a firm for at least 3 years. And that's
but they're not showing you how to get a gig.
But no, right.
They're not showing you how to develop business, right?
So I had always been, I think I'm generally an extrovert. I like meeting people. I like that part of it. So I built good relationships with the clients that I'd worked with, consultants, contractors. Like I kind of knew that was a strength of mine. I think just, building relationships. But there's just a lot that I didn't know about, starting a business. So I was this is a long story.
That's good.
So by that time in 2009, facing sort of, unknowns, uncertainty. And so my now business partner, David Plummer, he had worked with my wife at a different firm. They had both been laid off at the same time. So he found some projects to work on. He was working out of his house and found some things to work on. He started getting my wife to help him get some drawings done on these projects that he'd picked up, because nobody was hiring. So he couldn't find another job. So he found some house remodels to work on, whatever he could do. And so he and I got to talking, and about maybe starting a firm together. And so I was, I didn't know what to do. It was like, I was 30 something years old, 31, I liked the idea of business ownership, but I had no idea what that meant, like everything you're saying. I didn't know anything about it. Like, how do you do this? And so, talked to a lot of different people and ended up having lunch with my former boss, the firm that I'd left, that I said, probably timing wise, I shouldn't have. I had lunch with him, was picking his brain. The Sieb Tuck is his name. He's still a mentor to me. We had lunch just a few months ago. So still keep in touch with him. But I was sitting there and explaining the whole story to him and going back and forth. And he was sitting there listening and nodding. And then finally he said, "Are you asking me for advice?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And he was like, "What do you got to lose? Just do it. Start your own firm. Like, if it doesn't work, you're that much stronger because of it, right? You've learned that much. You learn those skills. You're that much more valuable. If it doesn't work," he's like, "It's probably going to work, but you don't like your job. You're uncertain. You're not making any money. What do you got to lose?" And that was like, I still to this day remember where we were sitting at lunch having that conversation. Like, okay, that's it. That's what I needed. That was the sort of decision point to me. We're like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start my own gig with.
Was it confidence?
It gave me some confidence, I think. Yeah. I just hadn't thought about it that way, but, and so that was 2010. So that David Plummer and I started what we called Plaid Studio, which is Plummer Lowe Architecture and Design. And we worked out of his living room for 2.5 years and, went through, tried to kind of figured out how to start a business and scrape by in the depths of the recession and then and did that for a couple of years, and then I had an opportunity to merge our firm with Centric, which was an existing firm at the time, and did that in 2012. So, and that sort of brought us to
And how
today.
many people are you up to now?
26, I think. So yeah, we and it's all the merger with Centric had been in different names and ownership. It goes back to 1955. It's one of the older architecture firms in Nashville. But we were able to kind of, piggyback on that history and that, reputation, but we basically were kind of starting something on our own. So, Gina Emanuel, my other business partner now, she was an employee at Centric. She came on as partner then. So the three of us with Jim Thompson, who's now sort of phasing out of ownership. He's moving towards retirement now. But the four of us sort of took Centric and have sort of built it. So all, the 26 people that we are all people that we've hired, the work, the projects, the sort of, we've basically been able to sort of build that since 2012.
Most of the projects that you work on, are they local or are they all over?
Yeah, mostly local.
Yeah. So you get to drive around and actually see your creations. And
we like that for several reasons. We've done things we've done several projects in Huntsville. We've done stuff in Chattanooga, looked at things in Memphis and Louisville, places that are close, but most of those are with a client relationship that we already have. So, but I'd say 95% of our work is in Middle Tennessee. And
what's that process look like? I mean, does someone come into you with a general idea what they want, or are they coming like, here's a blank canvas, I got to have these features of this building, make it, or what does that look like? Depends.
So, our work is all over the place. We do, we don't have necessarily a bread and butter, like we only do, restaurants, or we only do, we do lots of different things. And so that can be all over the place. If it's like we do a lot of work for developers where they may not even, they're looking at a site, like, oh, here's a property. What can I do on that? And we'll come up with a dozen different mixes of buildings and uses and things that could go on there. And just to see sort of what, do market research, what's that neighborhood, what's the demographic, what's missing,
you'll go that deep.
Yeah. And then we'll present to them, okay, here, the neighborhood doesn't have, this type of restaurant, or needs more housing, or there's no hotels in here, or, there's a lot of this that could support this. Right. And help sort of envision. So a lot of times it's truly a blank slate. Like, this is a site that's for sale and I'm interested in it. What could I do with it? And we will tell them that. But then there's clients like we do public work. We do, some of our bigger projects right now with the state of Tennessee. They're pretty defined. Usually they've got a very specific list of, we need this many offices, or we need, this museum space, or we need this and that. And then, we'll take that program and, design, layout, see how it fits, So.
How much is a design affecting the actual feel of a space? Like, how much influence do you have?
Yeah. I mean, so for us, I mean, we try to do, design is important to us. So we are a design first shop, meaning that, all of our projects, we try to, one, they need to be something interesting. We don't do a lot of cookie cutter kind of, stuff. And generally what we try to sort of preach in our shop and with our staff is that, there's a story to tell. I know you're a storyteller, and we try to do that with design, right? So what is, you said like, oh, you'll go that deep. Well, the part of that is what is, it doesn't, I mean, it takes some skills to fit this much program into this sort of box or whatever, but that's problem solving on one level. But then, okay, the box, this site has been here for generations. What was it in its past? What's the stories that site can tell? What's the stories that the business or the property owner, what's their background? How can their building reflect their values, their vision, so that it's not just sort of pragmatic, problem solving, but there's storytelling involved in that too. So we did an exercise just in one of our, office retreats a couple of years ago, where we asked everybody in our office to, write down their 3 favorite, buildings that they had ever visited or been to in person. And then also their 3 favorite projects that we had done, as Centric. And then ask them to describe what they remembered about, or what made those projects special. And it wasn't that, oh, that material was really cool, or, the railing detail was really, modern or whatever. It was something about a memory, right? Like of being in a space, or the feeling that you got, or the sense of the way the light came through, or the way it framed a vista or whatever. So when you asked about experiences, that's what we're trying to design, right? Is that you remember the places you've been because of the experience, not necessarily because of the architecture. It's the space and the experience. So that's to me, that's that storytelling piece of it.
It's got to be exciting to like going through the design process, from the design process to the 2 or 3 years it takes for it to become something, to actually walk through the space. Do you ever have like this weird feeling when you're actually physically in the space? It seems like that would be kind of really exciting.
Sometimes, yeah. I went through, when I first started in my career, I kind of bounced around a few different places. And it seemed like I was working, I worked on projects in early design phases as a young intern architect out of school. And they would, for whatever reason, they never got built. So I was probably almost 4 years into my career before I had the first project actually get built that I had worked on, which is unusual. And so I remember just being really excited to go on the construction site the first time and see like the, actual ground was broken and that the foundations were going in, the walls were coming up on something that I had designed. So, so
that's exciting.
That is pretty cool. But
now you get to drive around the city and be like, me.
Yeah. So I listened to your interview with Chris Parker with City Construction.
Yeah.
Which we worked with City on several projects, and they're one of our favorite contractors. But I heard him saying that too. Just being able to sort of brag to his kids about, we built that place and we built.
That really
place.
To be part of a skyline is really, I think, powerful, because this is your city. We get to create what we want to create. And, I think what I find interesting about that whole process is this act of visualizing a future that we want to create, and the people that are going to be involved and people that are going to be impacted. Yep. And for actually affect the skyline. There's some things I'm not excited about with our skyline, but.
Well, yeah. And, there's big impacts like, the 30-story towers downtown. We don't really design those. Not, that would be a fun challenge, but those are usually, it's a little bit bigger than what we do. But like one of the things that our work that we're proud of a lot of our projects, but we do a lot of adaptive reuse projects, which are, old buildings, old factories, or they don't even have to be sexy buildings. They can be, kind of dogs, but making that into something cool.
Yeah.
And so those places like Sylvan Supply and the Sylvan Park neighborhood, or Stocking 51 in the Nations, or the factory at Franklin, those projects of ours that people remember because they go to the restaurant, or they go shop, or they go hang out at the bars and those sort of places. And we like that those projects in particular, because there is a great story already inherently, right? There's a history with an older building and its sort of generations of use. But we're also not, whenever we can, we try to preserve a little bit of that story rather than just tear it down and build something new that could be kind of anywhere USA, right? Like it's like try to maintain something that makes that uniquely Nashville. And so those aren't the biggest necessarily skyline altering projects, but they're the ones that the locals like to go to, the ones that people like, because it's sort of preserving some of the older Nashville. I'm a Nashville native, 7 generations, 8 generations, something like that. So it's important that we sort of leave a good legacy on our city,
So after starting your, getting involved in your own business and navigating that, what was a big decision that you've had to navigate in your entrepreneurial career?
Yeah, a couple. I think so. When I mentioned the merger with Centric in 2012, so for about 2 years, well over 2 years, David and I had been building a business out of his living room, but we're out from scratch. And we'd had a couple of successes. We had a good, timing wise, you never wish natural disasters on anyone or any city, but the 2010 flood in Nashville was a help in our business. Terrible thing that happened, but it also provided a lot of jobs for people that didn't have jobs and didn't have things to work on in the design and construction industry. So 2010 actually was a good year for us when we started our firm. We ended up through a contractor we had a good relationship with doing the restoration on the Grand Ole Opry House. And so we had just started our business, a few months before and ended up being part of a really important project. And that's still a really important client for us to this day. We still do work for Ryman Hospitality Properties. But so we had, but 2011 wasn't as prosperous. So, it was more like what you'd expect as a startup in the middle of the recession. We were doing, garage apartments and whatever we could, come in the door, but we were building something. So I was really proud of what we were doing, and the opportunity to merge with Centric came up. And certainly from a business perspective, this was an established firm, and they had a good book of business, a good reputation for, in the community. But it wasn't anything that we had built, and so I resisted a little bit the idea of sort of latching on to something that we didn't have anything to do with, and we didn't know the people, and so in fact, when Marion Folks was the majority owner of that firm of Centric, and he was looking to retire. He was getting close to retirement age, and part of that was finding, a succession plan, of which we were, a part of. So we basically bought out his shares over the next few years. But when he proposed the idea to us the first time, we talked about it, went and had several lunches with him, and then we told him no. We decided, we liked what we were doing. We were going to keep building our thing out of David's living room and try to build a business on our own. And then, and so that kind of went away for a few months. And then, thankfully, some wise, mutual acquaintances we had said, "Hey, you guys should reconsider this. This is a really good offer, a really good opportunity for you guys." And so we picked the conversation back up. And
what was the original fear?
I think it was just that I think we liked the idea of building something from the ground up that was ours. And I think we were worried that we would lose that if we sort of latched on to a firm that had a lengthy history and an established presence, that we would sort of have to adopt that as our identity.
Yeah. And
and what changed, I think, the second time was actually meeting Gina, who is my partner now, and Jim, and sort of realizing that just that Centric at one point had been over 30 employees, but through the recession and everything else that happened, they were down to 6 people. I think it was a small shop, and we kind of knew that if we came together, we were 3.5 people at that time, and they were 6. We kind of knew there'd be a little bit of attrition through that. And so we could see that there was a chance to really build something from the ground up, even though it was this sort of, we kind of say it was an arranged marriage almost, because we didn't, know each other. But I think the other part with that was we could see that Gina certainly was aligned with what we wanted to do. We wanted to build something, build a business, build a reputation of our own, and we had the opportunity to do that. And so, there was just an alignment. I consider myself fortunate that I my business partners are my best friends, and it wasn't like I went into business with my best friends. We became friends,
Oh, that's great.
after starting businesses together, right? So
how do you guys decide who did what? Because partnerships are not always
no.
equal. You know?
I think we were really lucky. I think that we all sort of balanced each other out. So
was that a discussion before you guys got together? Like
a little bit, but not really. No.
Yeah.
When David and I started together, I think he was excited because I had this, I got excited about the business development side. Like I was like, okay, all these relationships that I've built over the time, I'm going to start making all these calls and taking people out to lunch and doing all this to sort of see, to build some business on my own. That sort of stuff David hates. Like he didn't want to do that. He wants to do projects. So we sort of naturally fell into those sort of roles, just the two of us. And then when we joined up with Gina, she definitely was sort of, she was a sort of third leg of a stool in that she definitely is really good at business development. My other passion is design. Like I'm not as detail oriented in terms of like producing construction documents and that sort of stuff. But I love the initial design, the concept, the early design stuff. So so the three of us sort of naturally kind of fell into these roles where I could focus on the design and some business development. Gina's definitely business development, and she's also a great designer. And so we sort of complement each other, and David's definitely the more operations and the business side. And so it kind of worked out. Yeah. So it's a good team. We're all sort of aligned in a common vision, but yeah, it was luck more so than anything
what drew you to the EO?
Yeah. So that's another, when you ask about sort of decision points. So, I've been thinking about that, just knowing, in advance of our conversation today. I think, so coming out of starting a business in 2010, then after the merger in 2012, I was, just had this sort of energy about, starting something new and building a business and perhaps a little bit of an ego, right? I felt like, I was just, could do whatever I put my mind to, right? Like, and so, and we were, wasn't always successful, but we were doing what we wanted to do. We were building our own business. We were, building a reputation of good design work, or, we're successful, and so, 2020 was a tough year for the world because of everything with COVID. But that also happened to fall for me personally on just from a project that I was working on that I had some personal investment, not financial investment, just personally invested. Like there was a personal relationship in this project. It was still to this day one of the projects that I'm really proud of from a design standpoint. But man, it was probably the most challenging project I've ever been through. Just contentious with the client, the contractor. It was just like just a battle the whole time. And that combined with all the COVID stuff and business like slowed down for a minute and then picked up like crazy, and it was just the world was kind of, it was a lot. I think I kind of got knocked off my perch a little bit, like my ego I got humbled. Yeah. It was sort of a tough year. And I feel like I've been trying to recover from that ever since.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
And so, I think going through bouts of sort of burnout, like which a lot of people, experience, and a little bit of self-doubt, or, imposter syndrome sometimes. Like, I feel like I'm not doing as good a job as my partners are, or as good a job as other architects, and like it's at some point people are going to realize that I'm just faking it over here and I don't really know what I'm doing, like all of that, sort of mental health challenges, and I think, talking to a few people, like a lot of people I've heard on your podcast, it's usually somebody involved in EO that starts planting the seed. And for me, there were a couple, Colton Mulligan. He's done, everybody knows Colton, he's done all our branding website stuff for the business. So we've known Colton for a long time, but he kept encouraging me to do it, and a few others that talked about the forum experience and how much that's therapeutic in a lot of ways. And so I think I was looking for something like that to kind of help just re-energize a little bit. And I think too, just we've been so busy. Nashville is a great place to do business if your business relies on people wanting to build stuff, because there's a lot of building going on in Nashville. And so that's a good thing. But we've been so busy that I don't feel like we as business owners have been able to just have the time to think strategically. It's just been, feels like 5 years of putting out fires constantly. Yeah. And so we just sort of joke about, it's kind of a joke. I mean, it's like, how soon can we retire? Like we're already looking to, like we're just working to retire. I just turned 48. So, I'm probably not retiring right away. And so I think what I'm still pretty new to EO. I think it's been a little over a year now or something I've been involved, but I get energized by hearing people talk about always kind of reinventing or looking for that next thing rather than just doing what I'm doing now until I retire. I think that happened
for a lot of people in 2020, because in 2020 there was a lot of total utter change in all kinds of areas. And then, suddenly people are starting to have a conversation. Do I keep doing what I'm doing?
Yeah.
For the next, how long? Right. Like what's next? Exactly. Like, is this how it's going to go? Yeah. And then suddenly people, working from home or whatever, they got, to go, to really have a lot of self-reflection. I used to tell people, I used to tell my team this. I was like, if at the end of this pandemic, you have not changed, then you've wasted a great pandemic. because we should have all like gone through some level of evolution, to kind of get out of the stuckness of life. And especially when your business is doing really well, you forget about who you are, who you wanted to be in the very beginning. And then you're standing around going, oh, great business thing. Is that what I wanted? I don't know. Yeah. I think that's for a lot of people. And I went through that with, selling a business and a lot of people navigate those kind of things and I think that's what EO is really there for, is for us to hear people evolving, and then decide when do we need to revolt, in our own world. Yes. And that doesn't mean bad. It's just like, sometimes we just get stuck, and how do we get unstuck? And all of that happens in the unstuck, for me, at least in my experience, is through stories, people that are navigating something and then go, oh, okay, I can do that. Yeah. I can revolt.
Right. Yes.
Myself.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about it that way. The revolt, but yes, maybe in some ways I love architecture. As I said, I sort of stumbled into it, but I can't imagine doing anything else. I love our business. I love what we've created. We built a great team. We kind of said as we set out in 2012 to sort of, we're not very formal people. Anything that smells corporate, we sort of shy away from. So we've never written down a, mission statement or anything like that. But if you asked us what we're all about, it's two things: it's people and design. It's like doing good work and hiring and working with good people. And so like we've built a great culture around people that just want to work together and be together. So I like going to work every day. I like the people I work with. I like the projects we're working on. But yeah, it just, I think there's ways to maybe expand what we do or do what we do better or continued improvement. We talk about growth in EO, and we talked about it in our forum, where there's, guys who want to grow in terms of revenue, numbers, statistics, right? I want to get bigger. And that's not me. We deliberately said we don't want to get any bigger than we are, but that doesn't mean we're not growing or we can't grow. There's other ways to measure success. So that's kind of what, I'm looking to get out of EO. And even the guys who are wanting to grow in numbers, I get motivated by that. There's their story, their methods, their approach to growth may be different than mine, but it's like that's the experience that I get out of EO that I wouldn't get elsewhere, right? Like,
Justin, thank you. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, we already done. It went fast. I talked way too much.
It flies by. Listen, if you are an entrepreneur here in Nashville, Tennessee, and you're curious about why over 300 plus entrepreneurs gather together every single month with about 8 people in what we call a forum experience to help each of us make powerful decisions to radically change our lives, you can visit eonashville.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.